It is the weekend after Independence Day, so of course we are going to talk about all things liberty. Colin Kaepernick and his apparent new job as the CEO of Nike, the left's misrepresentation of Frederick Douglass's Independence Day speech in 1852, and their meltdown over Trump's Salute to America parade. We'll dig into all of that and more if there's time. I'm Big E, and this is the Liberty Cast. Since I didn't mention it in the show before Independence Day, happy belated Independence Day, everybody. I hope everyone enjoyed their barbecues, fireworks, spending time with family and friends. But as with every holiday, I hope that you all took some time to contemplate exactly what Independence Day means and appreciate the freedom that we enjoy by virtue of being citizens of the greatest country in the history of the world, despite what the New York Times would have us think, and we'll get into that later. But it has been a wild week, hasn't it? So much to get into, and so much that really, really pissed me off. But let's get into it. Speaking of what really pissed me off, I'm sure all of you are aware of the outage that happened with Facebook and Instagram where you couldn't post pictures and things like that. And in the beginning, I thought that conservatives were being censored because I was trying to post pictures of the flag and comment on the story that we're about to talk about here in a second. And it just really felt like conservatives were being targeted in the run up to the 4th of July. Turns out it was a global event with Facebook and Instagram. So I calmed down a bit, but I just remember being otherworldly pissed off. But anyway, such is the nature of technology, right? So one of the things that I was trying to talk about on Facebook and Instagram was, and I tweeted about it, but I wanted to talk about, and I did extensively really, talk about Nike and Colin Kaepernick and the dust up they had over the shoes featuring the Betsy Ross flag. And it's so ridiculous. I posted about it so many times because it really, really pissed me off. And it's so ridiculous that you hardly know where to begin. But I'll start with this. Nike should be ashamed of themselves. How they let this fool, this moron, this useful idiot, how they let him push the left's anti-American agenda, how they let him bully them into pulling this shoe ahead of the 4th of July is just mystifying to me. And frankly, I don't think it really qualifies as bullying. He just told them it was offensive, and with their tail between their legs, they told all of their distributors and retailers to send the shoes back. So how did they let this happen? Does Colin Kaepernick run Nike now? Does he own a majority of shares or something? Is he the CEO? I mean, I don't get it. They could have made a ton of money, and they could have reinvigorated a customer base that was already boycotting them for the Kaepernick campaign. And I suspect, based on the reaction that some people had who didn't let the original campaign deter them from buying Nike, saw this as the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. I know I'm not going to be buying any Nike products until they reverse field and dump this guy. And honestly, that may not even do it. But aside from the present day practical aspect of this move shows a stunning lack of historical perspective. And that's not really surprising coming from a guy like Colin Kaepernick, who clearly has a lack of knowledge of history or even a willingness to pursue facts and data and therefore the truth. So what are some of the facts? Well, here's one that they don't teach in schools. One of the first drafts of the Declaration of Independence included a paragraph condemning slavery as a violation of a slave's natural right as human beings. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain. Determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold, he has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or restrain this execrable commerce. That's only half of the paragraph that was eventually cut from the Declaration of Independence, but there's still a lot to break down there. So let's go through it. In this paragraph, Thomas Jefferson is describing the horrors of slavery, the kidnap and transportation of slaves from their native land across the ocean, a trip that many didn't survive. And Jefferson uses the word infidel, but in this case, it doesn't have the connotation that it does in today's vernacular. In this case, the term infidel is referring to the Christian king, King George, and his betrayal of the Christian faith, not just by engaging in this practice, but when he says he has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or restrain this execrable commerce, he's referring to the British governors repeatedly vetoing legislation put forth by some states to abolish slavery. If you've read the Declaration of Independence, and if you haven't, please do so. But if you've read the Declaration, then you understand that it was not just a declaration stating that they were cutting ties with the British Crown, but a declaration of war for independence. And part of the reason was the Crown's refusal to allow the colonies to stop buying and selling slaves. But let's get back to Colin Kaepernick and Nike. Colin Kaepernick found the Betsy Ross flag offensive. Why? I know Colin Kaepernick and the rest of the morons that are supporting this nonsense would like us to believe that the founders were all horrible people who should be stricken from the historical record because they owned slaves and perpetuated the practice of buying and selling them. I think we've already debunked that, and there's ample evidence to continue to debunk that. And I'll have some links to some websites that address this subject so you can check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. But the flag wasn't about slavery, no matter how much they would like us to believe that. It was a symbol of unity. 13 stripes and 13 stars representing each colony in the Union. But are we really surprised that Cretan Colin Kaepernick found it offensive? He was kneeling for the current flag at the beginning of football games because he believes that the flag is the symbol of a country that promotes police brutality against black people. So again, are we really surprised that when the Betsy Ross flag and the current flag are the same flag? It's the same flag. Just now there are more stars representing more states. That's it. That's the only difference. But just like the Betsy Ross flag, it is meant as a symbol of unity. So that hasn't changed either. That is still what it represents. And now it takes on an even deeper meaning and should be even more revered since we drape that flag over the caskets of our brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for this country. But before I move on, I just have to address this about this guy. I was going to tack this on at the end, but since I'm done talking about this fool, I just want it to be over with and get it out now. But on the 4th of July, he sent out this tweet where he quoted Frederick Douglass. "What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? This 4th of July is yours, not mine. There's not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour." That was a semi-quote from the speech that Frederick Douglass gave on July 5th, 1852. And it's not really a quote. It's several lines from different parts of the speech strung together. But if you read the whole thing, it is a pretty, even though these lines, they paint a pretty stark picture. If you read the whole thing, it is a really scathing rebuke of the country and the hypocrisy of promoting the ideals of natural rights while chattel slavery is still legal. It is horrible. It is the original sin of this country. But something that Kaepernick and the rest of the left who are celebrating him miss is that while criticizing the country, he also praises the country and the founders and the genius that went into the formation of this country. And then there's the end of the speech where he concludes with a message of hope. And I quote, "Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery." End quote. This is just more evidence that Kaepernick is either ignorant or he is fully aware of the point that Frederick Douglass was making and cherry pick certain lines to further his cause, just like the left always does when facts are not on their side. And I could have just said, just like the left always does, because facts and data are almost never on their side. They're allergic to such things. All right, I've given that guy enough airtime. Let's move on. But we're going to stick with the theme of Independence Day and talk about the controversy that seemed to be surrounding the president's plan to hold a parade honoring the military on the 4th of July. Seems reasonable to me. But one of the lies they tried to feed us was that this was somehow self-serving the president, that it was a parade to honor Donald Trump. I fail to see how that's true. Just like with everything else, they just make stuff up. I mean, I listened to his speech. I don't think I heard him say "I," referencing himself once. And I can recall a bunch of Obama speeches where it seemed like the only thing he was talking about was himself. So if they want to talk about self-serving, they should look back at some of those past speeches. But anyway. But they also said that it was a partisan event and that Republicans were handing out VIP access. What they failed to point out is something that we will talk about on the other side of this quick break. So what the media fails to point out when they talk about this being a partisan issue and that Republicans had this VIP access is that the Democrats had the same access. They just chose not to go. And so by choosing not to go, they're the ones that made it a partisan issue, which they do all the time by opposing any and everything that this president does. Even when they supported similar things under different presidents. And most egregiously and relevant right now is their response to what's happening at the border. And there's plenty of sound that we could go to. Do we really need to? Yeah, we need to, because I want to take every opportunity I can to embarrass them and refresh our memories in the process. Check it.
It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
Today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half century. And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill.
When we use phrases like undocumented workers, we convey a message to the American people that their government is not serious about combating illegal immigration, which the American people overwhelmingly oppose. If you don't think it's illegal, you're not going to say it. I think it is illegal and wrong, and we have to change it.
The day when America could be the welfare system for Mexico is gone. We simply can't afford it. And I think you've seen the figures to state and local governments of what the cost is. It's over $2 billion.
I think we should enforce our borders. To have a situation where 40% of the babies born on Medicaid in California today are born of illegal immigrants creates a very real problem for the state, which is in deficit. 17% of our prison population at a cost of $300 million a year be illegal immigrants who come here and commit felonies.
I know that clip was a little long and not exactly on the topic of Independence Day, but I wanted to use that clip to illustrate the fact that these people have no principles whatsoever. And the fact that they are so easily swayed because they don't like somebody is amazing to me. But it's the left that made this parade a partisan issue. President Kennedy's inauguration included a military parade. President Eisenhower's inauguration featured a parade. While World War II was still going on in 1942, there was a parade in New York City. And then there was a victory parade after the war ended. And there was also a victory parade after Desert Storm in 1991. Those all took place in a time when we were still mostly united in a love of this country and an appreciation for the military. Those days are clearly over. If this president says it, you can bet everything you have that the left is going to oppose it, no matter how much they might have been for it if it had come out of Barack Obama's mouth. Now, one criticism about the parade that I get and to a certain extent understand is the expenditure. I think it was about $2.5 million that they diverted from the park service. I get why people would object to that. The flyovers of all the military aircraft will probably cost somewhere around $3 million. I understand the criticism of that. But then again, coming from the left, who's always willing to throw money at any problem without regard for cost, it really rings hollow to me. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the billions that they like to spend on anything and everything. So all things being equal, I'm okay with it. Another topic I wanted to discuss with you guys. I'm having a really, really hard time understanding what is happening. On an intellectual level, I get it. I understand that the political class has shifted very, very far to the left. And not just the liberals and the Democrats, but they've taken the entire establishment and moved it left, because what we see as the Republican Party now, for the most part, would have been Democrats 40 or 50 years ago. But I guess understanding is the wrong word. I'm having a hard time accepting what I'm seeing. I mean, the New York Times, they ran basically what amounted to a hit piece against the United States during the 4th of July. And as I was watching the ridiculousness that they were talking about in this video, I was Googling some of the things that they were saying, and I guarantee that of the 3 million or so people that have viewed this video, 90% of them are just swallowing and accepting as fact what they were feeding us, hook, line, and sinker. Not bothering to even do simple Google searches on some of the things they were talking about. So let's debunk some of this drivel right now. Listen to this.
America is the richest country in this club, but we're also the poorest, with a whopping 18% poverty rate, closer to Mexico than Western Europe. 12.8 million American children live in poverty. That's almost 1 in 5 of our kids.
Now, when you search for that stat, the very first thing you see is that it's more like 12% as opposed to the 18% that they claim. And it's actually 12.3 to be exact. But that's not the whole story, though. Even the poorest among us would be pretty well off in a lot of other countries. Now, in 2019, the federal government has set the poverty line at $25,750 for a family of four. And for a single person in the United States, the poverty line is $12,490. That's tough, for sure. But if you put that level of income, somebody with that level of income in some of the extremely poor countries, they'd be rich, or at least very well off. Now, there is extreme poverty where people who live on $2 a day or less. And a study by the American Enterprise Institute showed that about 3.6 million households reported incomes at that level. However, further investigation showed that of those 3.6 million, less than 10% actually lived in that kind of extreme poverty. This is extremely misleading by the New York Times. And they were just getting started. Listen to this.
We spend more on healthcare than any other country in the golf club, especially out of our own private little pockets. But we live sicker and shorter lives. We're fatter. And globally, we're more likely to see newborns die. We're even behind Bosnia.
Okay, so while it is true that in the United States our life expectancy is shorter than other countries and is actually on the decline, it has to do with the choices that we make, not the quality of the healthcare. Obesity, which before we knew better was indicative of prosperity, now it's a choice that a lot of us make. And by not proactively doing something about it, that in itself is a choice. Alcohol-related accidents and diseases, and according to the CDC, drug overdoses are the biggest factor in that decline. But we spend more per capita on healthcare because it's more expensive here than it is in other countries. And the reason our infant mortality rate is so much higher than other countries is that we count stillborn and premature babies in that statistic. Many countries don't include babies that don't reach 22 weeks of gestation. Another contributing factor is fertility treatments, which lead to multiple births, where twins and triplets and quads are born and have lower survival rates. It literally took me just a few minutes typing in a few searches to find out that everything that this guy was saying is a load of crap.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, there's more. And this is actually something that I've brought up on the show here in the past, but just listen.
Turns out at the level of high school science, we're 19th of 36. Reading, 20th. And math, a dismal 30th.
We rank far behind a number of other countries in education, but just like with everything else, context is key here. And we rank below a lot of these countries because we allowed the government to get involved. As soon as we allowed the left to take over education, this was the inevitable outcome. That they need a populace that is under and miseducated so that they can be more easily manipulated. That's why they oppose school choice. Yes, I know that they're pushing for free tuition for everyone, but that's not so that everyone has access to an education. A lot of these institutions of higher learning haven't been educating people for a long, long time. They've been indoctrinating them. You used to have to learn Latin in high school and continue to study it in college. I don't know anyone that has studied Latin. I certainly didn't. I don't even know if my parents did. I'll have to ask them. But that indoctrination is why we have such a significant segment of the younger generations that have a favorable view of socialism, which is the form of government that Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and their cohorts are desperately trying to usher in. Now, in this piece of trash that the New York Times published, the speaker talks about how we have freedom and that other countries are jealous of and things like that. But he does it in such a mocking, condescending tone that it's rather nauseating. But you know what? Let's take a quick break and I'll wrap this topic up and get you out of here with a quick story about a tyrannical move that is being floated by some on the left. We live in the greatest country the world has ever seen. Yes, we do have some darkness in our history, but no matter what the leftist media says, we have overcome that. We fought for independence and won. We fought fascism and defeated the Nazis in World War II. As a country, we have donated more money to charity than the entire GDP of most nations. We're a generous nation. We live in a country where the opportunity is there to go from being dirt poor to a millionaire. We live in a country where I can get on this microphone and criticize anyone in the harshest terms possible, short of threatening or inciting violence, and not worry about going to jail. No other country in the world can boast such a thing. Not Canada, not Great Britain, not Denmark, the socialist utopia that Bernie Sanders likes to float as an example to aspire to, which is not really a socialist country, but, details. Not Russia, obviously, and certainly no country in the Middle East. So if you think this country is so terrible, then I invite you, I implore you, leave. We don't want you. We don't need you. Bye. All right, one last story before we get you out of here. Frederica Wilson beclowns herself yet again. She does it every day with the outfits that she wears, but listen to this.
Those people who are online making fun of members of Congress are a disgrace. And there's no need for anyone to think that is unacceptable. We're going to shut them down and work with whoever it is to shut them down, and they should be prosecuted.
So I guess she wants me thrown in jail for calling her a clown. I mean, this is the United States of America. We do have the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, at least last I checked. But here she is advocating for jailing people for making fun of her and her colleagues. I mean, has she read the Constitution? Better question, is she even aware that such a thing exists? Well, let me tell you something. She and her colleagues have earned every drop of ridicule that they get. Every last drop. Because they're all terrible at their jobs. Not all. Most of them, especially the ones on the left, are terrible at their jobs.
Terrible.
Now, to be fair, she does go on later on in that rant to talk about threats against members of Congress and things like that, which is already illegal. Threats against anyone, regardless of position, elected office, whatever, making a threat against somebody is illegal. But first, she very clearly stated that if you make fun of a member of Congress, you should be prosecuted. This is just more evidence of the left's totalitarian tendencies coming out. Say that 3 times fast. But they're very comfortable with silencing, punishing dissent. They don't care about debating. They don't care about trying to persuade someone to their side. When they get into power, it's either submit or go to jail. The founders fought a revolution to get out from under that kind of tyranny. But if the leftists were to ever regain control of the presidency and both chambers of Congress, who knows? Well, no, we can make an educated guess. There would be executive orders. There would be all kinds of legislation to take away our guns, to make certain speech illegal, to make making fun of members of Congress illegal. They're not hiding anymore, folks. This is what they want. They are letting that freak flag fly, telling us all they're coming for the guns, they're coming for the speech, they're coming for the Bill of Rights, they're coming for the Constitution. The Constitution restricts the power that government has, and they hate that. And in case you think this is some sort of conspiracy theory, right-wing fever dream, it wasn't that long ago when the left was all for securing the borders. It wasn't that long ago when the left said openly, we're not coming for your guns. Yet here we are, they're advocating for open borders, and they're coming for our guns. Is speech, or is the entire Bill of Rights, the entire Constitution, really that far off if they get into power? I say no. And I think the evidence is there to support that I'm right. All right, y'all. I'm sorry to end on such a downer, but I'm not here to blow smoke. I'm here to tell you the truth, and that's the truth as I see it. So the only thing we can do is make sure that it doesn't come to pass. But anyway, folks, we're out of time. That is our show. So thank you all for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, anywhere that you like to get your podcast, you can find us. And when you do, please subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends. We're seeing a slight uptick in traffic, so I'd like to keep that going. We've been at this for almost a year now. I think next week will be a year. And I'm liking what I'm seeing with the growth of the show. But obviously we want it bigger, and we want to reach more people and move up the charts. You can also find all of our shows pretty much since the beginning on the website, thelibertycast.net. You'll find about 2 months worth of the most recent shows. And then if you scroll all the way down, you'll find a link to an archive of the rest of them. So you can find all of our podcast content, blog posts, and articles in one spot. But we're also on social media at The Liberty Cast on all 3 platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you'll find additional content and links to all things Liberty Cast. But again, as I said, thank you all for listening. And as usual, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.